Hi everyone, Spider-Man 1991 here, and I'm going to do a movie review of The Amazing Spider-Man. It's been about a week since the movie's been out, so I figured, maybe it's been enough time to talk about the movie. But first, though, this is my non-spoiler. There will be spoilers in this review, so if you haven't seen the movie, I don't recommend watching the full video until you actually see it. But first, my non-spoiler review. It was awesome. It was definitely It's definitely a nice first film to a new Spider-Man franchise. I can't wait to see where the other films now. It doesn't necessarily try to replace the Sam Raimi films, just introduce a new perspective on the Spider-Man origin and Spider-Man himself. Okay, that's it for non-spoilers. Spoiler review starting in 1, 2, 3. Okay, back to my previous statement. The movie is great. I liked it. Okay, like I said, and it's not just because I went in there with a fresh mind. I actually did go in with a fresh mind. I left all my opinions of the Sam Raimi film right outside the theater. Went in, thought, wow, this is a great movie, great superhero movie. I loved it. But as long as I have talking about the Sam Raimi films, this movie does, even though the title is Amazing Spider-Man, it felt more like I was watching the Ultimate Spider-Man on screen. I mean, like the real Ultimate Spider-Man comics, not that show on Disney XD. Anyways, this movie, whereas the Sam Raimi films took a lot from the regular main 616 universe of Marvel, this one took like the Avengers, took advantage of the Ultimate Universe. One thing I noticed was Richard and Mary Parker's background, Peter Parker's parents. They were scientists in this movie, just as they were in the Ultimate Universe, unlike in the main universe where they were spies. So, and also, the spider that bit Peter Parker to give him his powers was part of an experiment at Oscorp, not just a spider that wandered into a radiation demonstration at a science museum. And Uncle Ben's speech to Peter about responsibility, when I heard it, I immediately thought back to when I was reading the first Ultimate Spider-Man story arc, and Uncle Ben was talking to Peter about how if you have the power to make a difference in people's life, then you have a responsibility to do good with it. And it was like word for word out of the Ultimate Universe, just blew my mind. And, and another topic that I know, not just from the Ultimate Universe, but also different from the Sam Raimi films, is that when Peter was building his web shooters in his basement and stuff, it was pretty similar to when he built it in the Ultimate Comics. And back to the web shooters, though. The Return of the Web Shooters, I think, was a great decision. Okay, it really... the thing about the mechanical... even though, organic web shooters do seem to be more convenient for Spider-Man, I think having him build his own web shooters, mechanical web shooters, just shows that not all of Peter Parker's strengths lie in his spider powers. They also lie in his intelligence, which he had before the spider bite. So it just goes to show you that not everything about Peter has to be spider powered based. No, he's also a genius too. And speaking of Peter Parker, Andrew Garfield did a great job portraying Peter Parker. Okay, he did a great job sort of showing that Peter is not the most popular guy in high school. He's not really social or whatever. He's just kind of a loner. I thought that was great added to the movie. And Emma Stone, she also did a great job portraying Gwen Stacy as sort of an intellectual equal for Peter and also girlfriend. And they both, when you see them both on screen together, they have amazing on-screen chemistry that really does justice to the Peter Parker-Gwen Stacy relationship. Okay, it was beautiful seeing those two together, going through the relationship, although it was kind of accelerated how they just went from like two people who knew each other to school to suddenly dating, and also Peter told her he's Spider-Man. Although I did like how he told her that he was Spider-Man. That was smooth, dude. But yeah, they were great portraying Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. and it was really a joy. If you are a fan of the Peter-Gwen relationship, you are going to love those two in the movie. Okay, and another actor I want. Okay, but it's not just those two who are in the movie. We also have Denis Leary as Captain George Stacy. Now, spoiler alert in this, George Stacy does die. Okay? Basically, George eventually unlike the main universe, Captain Stacy, the movie's Captain Stacy doesn't believe that Spider-Man. It still believes that Spider-Man's a vigilante. He needs to be brought to justice. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It kind of shows that George Stacy is a guy who's by the book. He's not necessarily an enemy, just willing to enforce the law, just as Spider-Man. However, he's willing to do stuff by the book, whereas Spider-Man's a superhero / vigilante. So, at the first it does kind of get off to a rocky start, but then eventually George does learn Spider-Man's identity. And at that point when he does, though, he does let Spider-Man go because Peter mentions that your daughter's at Oscorp and the lizard's attacking, you gotta let me go, man. And so he lets him go. He lets him go to save his daughter. And then eventually George arrives to help out Peter a bit during the final battle, but the lizard unfortunately stabs him right through the chest. And then after Peter saves the day, he goes to comfort a dying George Stacy, and they do have a talk where George tells him that, Peter, you're going to be making a ton of enemies now, and I want you to keep Gwen safe, so please stop seeing her. I mean, it's kind of like the same message of when George was dying in the original universe, but with a different method, in that basically he told his dying words were, look after Gwen, Peter. But in this case, he's just saying, like, I want you to look after Gwen, but so far the safest way would be for you to not see her. And Peter does decide to follow George Stacy's last request. So he stops seeing Gwen, and he does start to break up with her. However, at the last few minutes of the movie, he decides, you know what, I love this woman, I'm going to date her. So, I don't know if that's I guess that's good. Even though, I don't know, either way, I don't know, I'm sorry, Peter, but either way, Gwen's gonna die. Yeah, I do have a strong feeling that either by the third movie or something, Gwen Stacy will die. Okay, that's just the thing about her character. She was Peter Parker's one true love who unfortunately died at the hands of one of his greatest enemies. And speaking of which, the man who killed Gwen, the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, he is mentioned in the film. Okay, we do get there is sort of an image of Norman Osborn as the CEO of Oscorp, but it's obscured, so you can't really see his face. And also, Osborn's assistant is talking to Dr. Connors, who's and saying that Dr. Connors needs to figure out the regenerative cure soon because Norman Osborn is dying. So something tells me they're going to play into something big with Norman. I don't know. I think probably by like the third film or something, maybe he'll be the Green Goblin. Maybe he'll be introduced next film along with Harry Osborn. I have no idea, but whoever it is, I hope they do it well. Although, given the way they've done this movie, I think it might work out for the best. All right, now to the main villain, Dr. Connors. He becomes the Lizard after Peter Parker, who wants to know more about his parents, sees Dr. Connors and helps him perfect the cure that would allow mammals to regrow lost limbs like reptiles. And unfortunately, though, the cure turns him into the Lizard. And that whole split personality thing with the Lizard that you do see in the comics, like it does kind of have a Dr. Jekyll. They do kind of do the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing with Connors and the Lizard, but the Lizard personality is just sort of a side effect. It seems like the cure is just more the cure that Connors injects himself with. It's more of just a drug, really, because he becomes more addicted to it, and the Lizard personality, which is just a voice in his head, tells him to keep doing it, and then eventually then his main scheme now is to try to turn all of Manhattan into lizard people. Okay, well, I would say that, I think I'm going to have trouble pronouncing his name, but Rhys Ifans does a great job portraying Connors and the lizard. However, the CGI on the lizard, everything from the neck down looked good. The face and the head, it was just not good. I mean, he kind of looked like... It's like everything else was transformed to a lizard, but he just had a big, scaly green head. That's all. He looked like Koopa from the Super Mario Brothers movie. That's the best way I can describe it. But, I would say that's probably another complaint, just one of two complaints about this movie. Well, actually, the second one isn't a complaint. The lizard head is probably my only beef with the movie. Also, this movie is going to be featured in 3D and in IMAX. However, the only reason to watch this movie in 3D or the IMAX is just for the web shooting. Okay? Several shots when Spider-Man's web slinging, he's like frozen in midair, doing a bunch of stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, they definitely this is definitely the parts that are just like, watching 3D. That's the only reason you should see it in 3D or IMAX. If you want to, go ahead, but if you don't want to spend the extra money, you can see it in 2D, and it's perfectly fine. Okay, and now for the future of this franchise. There will be a sequel. Okay, and sequel has been announced, and it's also been confirmed that this movie is the first in a new trilogy. Also, and like I said, Norman Osborn is involved, and I think they're going to play him up for a bit and bring him into a big role, I think, for probably the third movie. And also, a post-credit scene leads to more films, too. So, when you get to the movie, stay after the whole special effects credits, then you'll get to your bonus scene. Basically, what happens is Dr. Connors has just been incarcerated into a psychiatric ward. Or psychiatric prison. Anyways, he gets put into his cell, and suddenly there's some weird guy dressed in black in the shadows shows up to speak to Connors. He asks him if Connors told Peter the truth about his father, Richard Parker. And Connors says no, and then demands that the guy in the shadows leave Peter Parker alone. But the guy in the shadows just doesn't listen and leaves. Now, now pretty much once that everyone saw that theory, everyone has a theory about it. I originally, when I saw it, I thought Osborn? I thought it was Norman Osborn, but apparently I found out later that Rhys Ifans confirmed that the man is not Norman Osborn, but he's just an associate of Osborn. So that leads me to my next theory, which could be the Jackal. The Jackal, the guy who created the clone of Peter Parker. Yeah, I mean, the Jackal makes sense. He's obsessed with Peter Parker, creepy guy, and the cloning might be a good plot. I mean, if they get rid of Gwen in the second movie, then they could bring in the Clone Saga. I think the original Clone Saga, not that whole stretched over 3 years in the 90s crap. Ugh. Well, anyways, that's overall The Amazing Spider-Man, I would say, is a great movie. Oh, also, Stan Lee does have a cameo in this, and it is really funny when you get to see it. So, overall, The Amazing Spider-Man is definitely a great movie. It's a great start to the new Spider-Man film trilogy. Does it replace the Sam Raimi films? No, it doesn't. It just offers a fresh perspective on it, okay? I would give it, I'd say, 4 out of 5 stars. That's my feeling of The Amazing Spider-Man. It's a great movie. I would definitely recommend it. People see it. Yeah, that's all. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Have a nice day. Spider-Man 1991 saying see you later.